Today, I want to talk about how to recreate any scene. I'm using the project The Electric State by Simon Stålenhag. It's a graphic sci-fi novel, super dystopian, and I love it. It's just like the artwork is fantastic. So this is all created in D5. I want to show you my process to be able to recreate any type of image or scene using these core principles. So let's get started. In my opinion, the most important step are your references, okay? This graphic novel actually has only 2 images of this scene that I recreated. So we actually need to use this one image as really the big starting point, right? Because without this, we've got nothing to look at. So make sure you're collecting reference images, drop them in a folder, bring them into Photoshop or Miro, and then start marking them up. The next step is I go kind of into a planning phase and I talk about all the different components that I need to think about or model. So the first one are these intimidating towers, right? So this is one element. The next component is this landscape with these beautiful rolling hills, right? So I want to make sure that I nail the terrain here. So this will be 2. Next, it's going to be the context, these little houses, right? So we'll add that. That'll be 3. The next is atmosphere, okay? So pay attention to like the clouds and the fog and everything, especially here, how it's like occluding the tower and everything. And then all that's left are these little details here, like the sign and the road and the fences and everything. So it's basically 5 different components. And obviously trying to match the composition, right? Basically being able to see these 4 towers, the landscape, and the context and the road and everything. So the next big part was actually modeling the key components, especially the towers, because it was the focal point. So you know, there's definitely some time spent there to make sure it looked as good as possible. So here you can see a little recording of this being done. I'm not going to show you everything because we're here to talk about D5 and how to build up your scenes. But if you're interested in this whole process, you know, I can definitely make a video about that. But anyways, once everything was modeled into D5, I saved everything as separate files. So basically the towers was one, street was another, context as others. That way I can import them in separately into D5. But here you can see all the details being added. You know, I'm also thinking about all the different material channels. You know, we've got like the emissive parts, we've got the concrete looking parts, the lights and everything. So all things you need to be thinking about when you're actually doing this, you know, for your own projects. So let's get started. I've opened up D5 as usual, giving you guys all the files for free. Just check out the description for the download link of all these files. So step 1, let's get all those files in here. So I'm going to go over here to import. In the Dropbox folder, you're going to see a bunch of files. You can just select them all and then hit open, and then we'll talk about, you know, what each one does. Great. So now that they're all imported, let's talk about how we're going to get this done. So I first talked about the tower being the biggest and the focal point. So we can texturize this and then we can move on to the terrain. So let's do that. So I'm going to switch back to D5, and right over here where it says single tower, I'm going to click this guy and I'm going to drag him out. So as you can see, I've got my tower here. And what I want to do now is I want to scale him up a bit just so he's big enough. And a good gauge for how tall an asset is actually just putting it next to a person. So if I just put this guy here, you know, these towers are like extremely intimidating, colossal, massive, you name it. So I'm just going to bring this up. So the idea is like when you're standing and you're looking up, you're like, oh my God. So this is a pretty good size. Obviously, once we get like the terrain in and everything, we can fine tune it, but it's good to have a good starting point because it's going to affect your actual texture scale. So if you're following along, you know, these are the sizes for you to copy. Anyways, now that we've got that, let's talk about the materials. So the different channels we've got here, we've got this red light material, then we've got kind of like this emissive polka dot looking material, and we'll talk about that. We actually have the yellow lights as another, and then kind of like this concrete looking material. So we got to find kind of like a grungy concrete to put here, and then we'll fill it in this and that. Nothing too complicated. So as always, let's go over to assets and let's search for materials, and we'll go to concrete. And now with the concrete, we want something that's got a little bit of texture to it. So generally these rough concretes are really good. So anything you can see here, it's got texturing. So like if I go to this guy, paste it here, you'll see I've got some details here, but it's tiling a lot. So what I want to do is I want to switch to triplanar. That way I get a nice world scale. And let's just test the UV randomizer out. Yeah. See how much nicer that is? That's fixed a lot of this. And let's just dial the stretch to the point where it's kind of like big enough so we could see from far away. Yeah, that's great. And now I want to tune the darkness of this. I want to make it a little bit darker, right? Just something like that. Okay. So this is really good. This looks great. We're going to add grunge to it in just a second. We'll be using decals. I want to take care of the rest of the materials. So let's fly over here to our red light. Right now, it's just a base red color. We want to make it glow. So we're going to use our emissive ticker. Okay, so we've got that. And I'm going to change the color to just be like a deep red. And let's boost the intensity. Let's leave it at 50 for now, and we'll have to calibrate it once we add like the atmospherics and everything. So now that we've done that, let's go down to our yellow light here. Make that emissive. Let's grab a nice yellow color. Click that over there, somewhere around there. And we'll do 50 as well. Okay, cool. So we've got some nice bloom going on. Then we've got this guy. This is a darker concrete band. So I'm just going to duplicate the main concrete volume, place it there, and let's just make it dark. There we go. Perfect. And now let's tackle this guy. So this, if you look at the artwork, it looks just like black, but we want to give it some texture. So a little hack I did here. I actually want this to kind of look like lights. That way the yellow doesn't stick out so much, and I want to break up the yellow. So check this out. I went to Midjourney and I actually generated a bunch of different textures that I want to plug into here. This is also in the folder. I'm going to grab this guy, and you can see the prompt here was nothing crazy. It was just like building facade, exterior pattern, nighttime, cyberpunk. And I just used a reference photo of exteriors. But the important thing is I did use the tile parameter, and this will actually give you like seamless textures, which is really cool. And to do that, you just type in tile at the end of your prompt if you haven't done that before. But anyways, I'm providing this for you. So anyways, once you've saved it, go over here to your black material. We're going to grab base color map and let's load that texture. So notice how we've got all this different variation now, right? It's not just like a single black texture. So that's really nice. You could go one step further and AIify this, so that way you're going to get some, roughness channels and everything. But the point is we have variation here. We've got like some oranges, we've got blacks, we've got dots. It actually looks like we're looking at like an inner technical core. Yeah, and that normal map is really going to help. So you could go and make it emissive, and now you've got a whole nother layer of emissive lights. So that's really cool. And then you could totally just like go in and play with the randomizer if you want even more noise, right? And then you can play with the stretch. So I'm going to switch to triplanar, and let's play with the stretch. Do something like this. So that looks cool. That's going to help blend that yellow in. So that's awesome. All right. Very, very happy with this. So now let's talk about the cables. The cables are just like a dark metal. So I'm just going to go over to assets. Let's go metal. Clear your search. And I'm just going to grab black matte metal. Not going to be anything crazy. I'll put that in. So this looks really good. Final touches. I want to just add rounded corner on anything. If you don't know what rounded corner is, it's got to soften up these edges. I'm going to make it pretty high. That way we can kind of see it from far away. Do that here as well. Okay, great. And we'll do our concrete. Good. Awesome. So let's see the front of this guy. Wherever he is. There we go. All right, cool. So this is really coming together. Now that we've got this here, let's make sure we save. Saving, very important. So I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm just going to call this the electric state. So before I finish this tower and we move to landscape, let's just add some grunge, and we can do that with decals. So let's go to Model, and we're going to look for decals, and we're going to just grab, rust stains, water stains. Like, I'll show you what's going to happen. Once I grab this, just using water stain, and I make this really, really big, you can just use V. Okay. Now it's adding all this variation here, and you can just lower the opacity a bit. Look at that. And now you'll see, you see that? It's not just this simple concrete anyway, or everywhere. So you can literally just go here and just start duplicating this. I'll hold down Shift. I'll move this around. You can rotate it if you want. And I'm just going to do this in a couple spots. So shift here, I'll rotate. Exactly. The idea is we just want, some variation. Okay, there we go. That's going to help break up the texture. If you want to use more decals, go ahead. I'm just showing you the workflow here. And so I'm happy with all this. I'm just going to group this for now. So holding down Control, click my tower, and then I'm just going to right click here and group. I'll call this tower. And we'll add more to this group in a little bit. But now let's move on to our landscape. To handle the landscape, since I've kind of planned this out, I put a site model together. So if I click this and I just hit sync coordinates, it's going to drop that in the right spot. And now I can use this as a way to start scaling the project. So in order to orient yourself, let's look at the artwork. Basically, the road goes down and then it does like a little hook and then it goes out. So if you're not following what I mean, just something like this. It goes whoop, whoop, and like that. So it goes up and then it goes out. So we want the hook side to be on our left. So hook side on the left, something like this. This is kind of what we should be setting up. Exactly. And then this is going to be, our tower. I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Now we can start thinking about the rolling hills. The rolling hills, let me turn off this. These guys here. So we're going to be blending our terrain tool into the model. The model is just really for scale. Since everything's flat, that's not too interesting. So we want to add all this variation. So let's go back to D5, go to your object outliner, click terrain, and now we're going to sculpt. So here we've got a size and we've got a strength tool. I generally leave the strength low until I'm comfortable with what it's doing. So I'm just doing some clicks. Okay. I might boost the strength just a little bit. Again, we just want a little bit of variation. You see how I held that and that went super fast? So I'm just going to do a couple clicks. So that was too strong. So this is what I mean. You gotta kind of be careful with what you're doing. I'm going to erase a little bit of that. And I'm going to just start painting these hills back here. Okay. So that's that rolling that I was talking about. And you kind of want to, just cover this green that I have here because that's just flat. That's boring. I'm just doing some clicks. I'm just clicking around. I want to just give it variation. If you don't want to do it this way, you could always use a height map resource and just like drop in a mountain. But that's a quick way of doing it. I want to show you how to actually do this. So I'm going back here. You could also introduce a different texture if you want to give it, more variation. You see how it's adding these like cool little like veins and everything. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, I'm just painting. We're pulling a Bob Ross here. Okay. Okay. All right. And the idea is if I bring the camera down here, do I get the rolling hills? And I do. So I might want to just lift this part a little bit higher. Okay. Because it's almost like we have layers, right? The back is a little bit higher. And we want to just cover the horizon line. Yeah, there we go. And you can go in and smooth it and everything. Perfect. There we go. If you want, you can also boost the size so that way you could do less clicks. But again, totally up to you. We're just doing our own inspired work here, right? Okay, perfect. And it's one of those things like you're going to get into a good spot. And then once you place everything, you might realize, oh, maybe I should change it. It's really difficult to get it perfect the first time. And just make sure you're covering some of this green. It's okay to have some of it. It's just the point is we don't want flat landscape. We want to have like some sort of height. That way when we place trees, it'll look really good because they'll be like up and down and everything. So cool, we've got this. That's good for now. I can always go back. I might just soften that because it's a little too poppy. Should be more like a strip in a way. So I could go and just like plateau this. Yeah, that's what that guy is. Perfect. Yeah, there we go. So that's that nice roll. And let's plateau this guy. Perfect. Perfect. That way they kind of feed into each other. Awesome. And then just like a little pro tip, if you didn't know this, you see how I'm getting like the cliff face here? You can actually tune when that face comes in with these guys right here. You can play with like the erosion and everything. So little fun fact, if you don't want any of it, you could just turn that off, but just a little cool thing to point out. I'll leave a little bit of it, gives it some realism, why not? And you could also do the same thing with like the peak, when the peak actually comes in. So if I lower this, you see how snow is gonna start gathering. So yeah, that's what that is. Since we don't actually need snow, we just want like grasslands, I can actually just replace this texture with something grassy like this. You might not see a big difference because it's very, very similar, but if you don't believe me, it's this red color. So that's what that is. So up to you what you want to do there, but again, I'm just pointing out that you can actually do all these cool things because it is. All right, so now that we've got that, I want to do a base block out of where these towers go, and then I want to start layering the atmosphere. So let's start with this guy. This guy's the closest. And if we think of like our camera here, he's basically in the third of our canvas. So if I were to bring this out, we kind of have this guy in that third here, and there's like another third here. And this guy's kind of like off center. So that's a good way of framing everything. So let's go back to D5, and let's say my camera is somewhere around here. And you don't need to commit to this like right now, but it's always good to just build your camera around the scene. So now that I have this here, I can start moving this guy so he feels correct. And this is where you might need to start scaling things, right? Because we don't, we wouldn't know from before. So I'm just going to scale this. Yeah. And I'll drop him there. Maybe move him a little bit there. Perfect. I just want to rotate it so the eye, I'm calling this the eye, if you don't know what I'm talking about, somewhere around there. Okay, great. And let's give him a friend. And it's funny to call him a friend because like in the book, these towers like are responsible for the demise of mankind. So no, funny. So I'm gonna drag this out. And again, you'll see I'm moving between the two just to make sure like the positioning is good. And I'll probably make another copy here. And again, we can always go back and edit these. It's no biggie. Okay. Yeah, they're all kind of looking in the same way. And then there's one in the far back. So it's something like this. So this is the initial block out. This guy should probably go much further. I think both of these both go much further. And they can actually go to the right a little bit more. So again, this is the initial block out. You can always go back. It's not like you can't, right? So we've got this. Let's save because I'm paranoid like that. And now let's talk about the atmospherics, because right now we've got this bright sunny day, but like in the book, it's never sunny. It's never beautiful, right? So there's a couple of ways of handling the atmosphere, right? You could use the AI atmosphere match to mimic the atmosphere. So to do that, you could do this guy, AI atmosphere match, and actually download the artwork. So I've provided that in the folder. If I were to plug that in and hit snap current view and start generating, it's going to start bringing in some of those colors. And once it does, I'll explain like what's going on. So I'll hit apply. It's going to start migrating. So we're going to start to see some of these blues come in, right? We're getting that HDRI. Okay. You see how much darker it is? You can see our colors popping, right? Okay. Now we can turn it off. So now if you were to do this manually, basically all it is, nothing crazy. It's an HDRI, right? Plugged in, and there's no sun right now. So if I were to turn on the sun, you start getting light there. But we could play with this if we want to give it some like highlights. And what I mean by highlights, I mean like rotating this and so the sun shines on it. But the original artwork, it doesn't look like there's any sun. It's just kind of like late in the day and it's super foggy. But you do have that option. You can probably lower the intensity to be like super, super low, just to give it a little bit of a highlight, just a little bit. Maybe we do like 0.1 and we soften out the sun disk radius. Okay, but that's really it on the lighting. There's nothing crazy there. It's really the effects that are doing a lot. So if I lower this was like before, and then this is after. And the big thing that's happening is our exposure, right? So it's basically the brightness. This is a good way to just like darken it. So negative 0.29 is what it's set at. The other thing we could do to kind of give it that look is a little bit of tint. So you see how I'm going a little bit to the left and I'm getting that cyan color. These little tricks are gonna help add up. The other thing we could do is turn on fog. So fog is gonna give us a lot of depth here. And as you can see, it's already making a big difference. So I'm gonna crank this guy to be more cyan, which is basically, you know, like the color of everything here. I'll do something like that, and you see like we're getting that nice glow. Okay, we can play with the density here. I'll add a little bit of that. The height, basically how much. Again, is super foggy, so we're gonna want all this. And then the start distance is like how far or close do you want it from the camera. I'm gonna do 0, and let's turn on volumetrics. We'll need this a little bit later, and I'll show you why. So this looks good. Maybe I boost the density just a little bit. And this is one of the things, once we start tuning everything, just gonna turn off the decals. Yeah. Once we start layering in everything, we're probably gonna wanna tweak things. But again, this is a good starting point. I'm gonna update my camera so these settings are saved. But you can see, all we did was we put in HDRI, we did fog, and we did a couple effects, right? But pay attention to the tint. The tint is really the big thing. You could play with the white balance too and lower this a bit just so it's a little cooler. But again, very subtle, and we were able to kind of replicate this look. So looking at this, you kind of see we've got that cyan look in the clouds and everything. So now let's continue tweaking away. So we've got all these nice little clouds here. If you want, you could go into Geo and Sky instead of in HDRI and actually play with like how many clouds there are and everything. That's one way of doing it. And if you don't know what I mean, under weather, you could play with the amount of clouds. So this is one way, one approach. So I'll show you that as well. So what I want to do here is just turn off the volumetric light, just because it was reacting oddly with that. So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to lower the time of day a bit. So I'm going to lower the intensity and the azimuth and the altitude. It's a little bit darker. Okay, so you see that? So that's another way of doing it, right? Both are totally acceptable. If you want the moving clouds, then go this way, right? So I'm just going to play with the amount some more, the density, and the height. We'll probably bring it lower. I could slow down the clouds. Okay. And I could also tune that. The only issue I will say about doing it this way is you don't really have good control of the actual sky globe, right? You see how it's like a blue color? And if you did lower the altitude, it would help a little bit more, but then you kind of lose like the variation. You see what I mean? If I go too dark, that is just like dark clouds, which not the worst thing, right? But just, again, something I want to point out, because it is nice, like this is being picked up. Like I do like the little clouds and everything. So again, all this stuff, you know, kind of matters when you're setting up these scenes. But the point is, all this stuff exists in D5. So now for this scene, I do want to play with the fog a little bit more, and we will probably lower the exposure just a little bit more. Yeah, probably somewhere around there. So I'll make another scene, and we'll call this, you know, dynamic, and then this one I'll call HDRI. So you can kind of see like there's two different looks going on here. Again, totally fun. I don't care which one you do. So the next thing is, let's actually talk about the terrain here, and the assets. So like we've got some trees, and we've got these little like kind of like reed looking things right around the path. So we're going to tackle this with scatter. And something I want to point out with the trees here, let me turn off all these layers. Pay attention to the grouping of the trees here. We've got like a dense bit here, then we've got another bit here, another bit here, another bit here, another bit here. I'll show you how we can control where they're spawning. But these reeds I was talking about, they're kind of consistent with following the road. So that is actually modeled in SketchUp. That's this guy right here. So what I'm going to do is let's apply a material here. And just for the sake of like me working, I'm going to just raise the brightness in my my camera here. Since I did save everything to the camera view, I can easily go back, but it's a little bit hard to see everything. So I'm just going to turn that off for now. So first thing I want to do is I want to apply some kind of like ground material. Actually, let's go with this. This isn't bad. Go with road surface. I'll place this here. This is tiling a lot, so I want to boost the size or the stretch. So I'm happy with like 0.25. That works for me. So I'm going to save. Anytime you start scattering, I recommend you save. I'm not saying it crashes all the time. Let's be a little cautious. So then I'm going to go over here to add scatter. I'm going to select the material, right? I'm going to click here and we're going to hit create. So now we've got to find assets that fit in here. All right, so let's hit nature and let's go down to succulent. And I believe there's a nice, yeah, these guys are nice reeds right here. So I'm going to click this guy and click a couple of these just so we've got some variation. Okay. And right now you probably don't see anything. So the reason behind that is the actual size of them. Probably way too small. So I'm going to go to distribution. I'm going to first make it a little bit more dense. So you can see they're popping, but they're teeny, right? Transformations. And let's boost this guy to 200. And maybe we do a $1.20. Okay, we might need to go even higher. So I'll go 150. All right, let's go even higher. Let's say 500. 600. Yeah, that looks good. 600, and let's do 400. Perfect. So that's like a better height. Still not perfect. Do 800 and let's do 600. Great. That's much better. We can boost the density some more. So if I want it to be even more dense, I can go to 10. Let's try 50. There you go. That's definitely better. Let's try 100. Okay, and I'm just going to turn off that. Yeah. So that's not bad. I can probably keep going further. Maybe 900 and 700. But again, it's one of these things we can always go back to. It's not like the end of the world if we don't nail it right now. That's the beauty of scatter. So if you don't know what I mean, if I click off and do other things and click back, I can easily just go back in there and tune them. So this is all good. I'm happy with this. So now let's talk about the trees. A couple different ways you can handle this. The trees, you could do it via scatter, or you could brush the trees. But if you remember, I was saying that they were basically in batches. So I'll show you both ways. So if you were to go over to terrain, and let's just grab another color. I'm going to call this grassland. And watch this. If I load this up, okay, and then I start painting right here. Okay, and like right here, because this is kind of like where the trees were coming from. This was, if you don't know what I'm talking about, they're kind of like here, and then they were going right in front of these two. So it was something like this in a way. So I'm just going to paint this. And then there was like a whole bunch right around here. Okay, I'm going to increase the size, probably the strength. Okay, something like this. So the reason I'm painting is scatter will actually detect this as one area. So now if I hit select material, you see this? That is that grassland. So if I hit create, and now I grab some of those trees, they're just going to spawn here, which is nicer if you don't want to brush, because scatter does have some like really nice functionality with the distribution transformations and everything. So little pro tip there. So I'm going to go to broadleaf because these are kind of like larger trees. I grab this guy. I grab like all these, anything that looks like they cover a lot and they're not like super massive. And just remember, after you download the asset, you do need to go back and click it. That's something people forget about. I'll grab this guy and this guy. So you can see, if you didn't believe me before, the trees are coming through. Beautiful. So now these guys, I was talking about, the benefit of scatter. Now I can just target these, make them a little bit taller. And let's go 120. And now I'm getting some really nice variation between these. Yeah, look at that. So that looks nice and dense. Happy with that. Let's go back to Photoshop. Maybe I can make them a little bit lower. Yeah, maybe. Maybe we do 180 to 100. Okay. So now that that's happening, let me go back to my terrain and I just want to paint some more pockets. And again, it's tied to this guy. So all we have to do is just paint and then we'll have to regenerate. So not a big deal. I'll paint another band here, another band there. Again, they're in pockets. They're not like loosely, randomly placed. That's more for like the bushes and everything, which we can definitely do a layer for. And then in between like this little hook thing, I was calling a hook before, we can do just a little bit of density. Okay. So now that we've got that, I can click this, and now it's asking to regenerate because it knows I changed the paint layer. So I'll hit regenerate, and now we'll get some tree friends over here. After this loads, there we go. See? I know what I'm talking about, guys. So there we go. Beautiful. I'm going to hit save, and now let's do another scatter group of just bushes. So the bushes are going to be a little trickier because there's not that many, right? If we look at the original, it's like, you know, some little pockets. You could brush this, you could scatter it. You know, maybe since we did talk about scatter, I'd just show you how to do it in brush. Why not? So I'm going to go over here to brush, and we're going to look for flowering shrubs. Sorry, we're going to go under shrubs. My bad. Yeah, these guys look good. One of the other limitations of brush is you only have 6, which, you know, is that really a big deal? No, just something to point out. But you are limited to just like these 4 sliders. So something to point out. So anyways, now that I've got that, I'm going to zoom in. And as always, I like to lower the density until I understand how dense it actually is. So I'm going to click once and see what spawns. Okay, so they're a little small, so I'm going to increase the size. Okay, I'll increase the size some more, and now I'll increase some density. And you could do some random size as well. Okay, good. So I'm just going to do a little paint. And in general, I always do 1-2 clicks. I don't hold down because it gets way too dense. Watch, I held down. You see what it did there? And I can't even like undo, which is really annoying. So I just need to go to eraser and erase these. So I'm going to switch back to brush, and now I'll do a couple more of these little bush guys. Okay. And again, we're just adding some variation everywhere. Great. Happy with that. And now let's go back. Yeah, we can see our little pockets and everything. So now we need a little bit of grass and everything. Grass is a little tricky. And the reason I say that is because there's so much square footage with the grass. You want to be really careful about how much grass you're actually spawning in, because if I were to turn this into a grass material, you're gonna see my FPS is gonna tank. So right now I'm at like 40, 47, 48. And if you're not sure how to show this, you can actually just go here to view and then show statistics. So watch this. If I were to change this to 3D grass, you're gonna see I'm gonna get a performance hit because it's generating all these meshes across, which isn't like the worst thing ever. It's just like, be aware that this is like a very expensive effect. Yeah, there we go. So now I basically like halved my my performance. So, you know, not the end of the world, but do note it is a pretty expensive effect. And then with the grass on the scatter, I would recommend painting any area you want to be like scatterable. So anyways, this looks really good. Yeah, you could definitely add grass here if you want. I'm not going to, just for the sake of performance and everything. I don't want to risk a crash or anything. So let's move on to the next area, and we'll finish materializing this. We'll cover some fun atmospherics, and then we'll get into the animation. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to go to assets, and let's look for asphalt. Okay, I'm going to grab asphalt 2, and I'm going to place this in here. And so the scale is super tight. So I'm going to make it triplanar, turn on the randomizer, and let me just change this to be, you know, a little bit lower, just so I can see more details. And I'm going to make it a little bit lighter, because again, this is a dystopian world, a lot of weathering. That's perfect. So now these stripes, they're super bright. And the problem with that is, you know, it doesn't look realistic. So a little hack I have is if you duplicate your asphalt material and paste it here, and you change the base color to be that like yellowish color, it'll actually look like it's painted directly on the asphalt, like it's picking up the normal map. So that's a nice little way to block all that. So that looks great. Happy with these materials. Now I want to talk a little bit about the context here. So if you look here, you know, we've got some houses, some signage, some fences. So I've provided all those 3D models for you. So all you have to do is go to your imported tab and start dragging these out. So I've got, you know, building 1 here. So I'll rotate this guy. Building 2, I'll rotate him like that. I'll put him there. Building 3, place this guy here. and building 4, which is this guy. And I'm just going to rotate and duplicate them just so it looks like we've got a little town here. I'll probably copy this guy over and rotate. Perfect. Now that we've got that there, let's talk about the signage. So we've got these little signs right here. Do that, place that guy there, and scale him. We've got some nice signage. I'll hit V, and we'll just copy this kind of around the bend. Okay, perfect. Next thing we have are these little fences. So I'm going to scale these a bit. I'll hit V, and I'm going to rotate them a bit. And up to you, like how many you want to place. Again, I'm giving you all the assets. So up to you if you want to kind of like really customize this. I wish there was a way to path custom imported assets, but fortunately there isn't. So I'm just going to show you how to place a couple. Again, I'm just holding down Shift and rotating as needed, just to mimic the look we have here. Okay, I'm going to shift out this way as well. Okay, so we've got some fences there, and we could change the material and everything. That's not an issue. So I want to talk about this over here. We've got some like volumetrics going on where we can actually see the light kind of catch itself on a cloud. So to do that, a nice little trick is if you were to go up here and go over to Assets, under Particle, you're going to see these really like fancy light cards. So watch this. If I switch to Smoke and I grab some of these and I place them in, they're basically 2D cards with a rolling animated texture on them. So now I've got this here, and let me just move this out. So this is that texture I'm talking about. And I can play with the width and the height and everything. So I can make the color to be that like neon color, like that. And now if I were to throw any light onto it, it'll actually catch and give me that color, which is really cool. So to mimic this look, to get the light on that surface, we've got our card here. And if we drop in a rectangular light, watch this, and I move him over here and make him really big, I'm just going to boost the size to 5,000. Notice how it's actually casting light. So if I switch this to be like a red color, that is that red we were talking about before. So I'll make this a little bit bigger. There you go. So check that out. You can play with the intensity and everything, and barn door and length, and the attenuation. So this is really nice. The problem is from far away, it doesn't show. So you're only going to see this on your close-ups, which, isn't really the end of the world, but just pointing that out in case you don't see it. So really, really handy trick. So I would just plug this like somewhere right in front of your, the light of these towers. And I would make sure the attenuation radius is large enough so it gets picked up on your clouds. So when you're animating this, it actually does come up. Yeah, and you can have multiple lights too. So as you can see, it is like lighting up all these cards, and you can get fancy and, copy these fog cards around as well. But anyways, the point is, I think you should have a bunch of these around, and that'll make your fog look a little bit bigger. You can change the pattern as well. I'll put this guy like there. And I'll just scale them around. So when I'm down here, yeah, I get all those different cards. Copy and rotate. So now we've got all that. Let's go and switch back to our light setup. And now you can see we've got, our clouds here, right? Coming from that. The overall darkness of the fog is a little intense, so I might just make it a little bit brighter in here and lower the density of our fog. Yeah, awesome. So now that I'm like happy with all that, let's just talk about the different camera angles and what you need to do. And you can continue working on this, of course, but my point to this video is to show you how to actually put this all together so you understand the steps. So the video, all I did was I got into the camera locations that I wanted, and I just started creating camera views. So if I wanted to do a simple push, I would do add current view, and then I would just move my camera and then do this. That way I've got a nice slow push, and I would just tweak all the speeds. I was between like 5 and 10 seconds. That way they were nice and slow. And you want to make sure that all these are on 2-point perspective, just so all your towers are nice and tall. So look at the difference there. And I would probably play with a focal length to be like, maybe like 25. Yeah, I'll do 25 here as well. And there you go. Some really nice, soft, beautiful camera angles. But I recommend doing this once you have all your environment settings dialed in. But I didn't do anything else crazy. So I'll show you some other views that I did. You know, I was saying earlier that the light's only going to show when you're close up. So what I did here was I set up a view, and then I just flew in closer. That way my light would appear. And now I'd get that nice glow. Exactly. And then some of the other shots that I'll talk about, I did some where I was just looking down at the forest. All this was at a current shot. I turned off 2-point so that way it wasn't odd. Synced it, and then I moved my camera over, and then I synced it, and I got that. As you can see, you know, I wasn't doing anything crazy. Once you have the overall environment set up, that's when things can be done very, very quickly and easily. Some of the other shots I did was like an up and down. So I did this, current view, and then I moved the camera up, and then I did that. And you'll see, there we go. And generally with my shots, I have all of them on linear. So right now, if I were to go here, you see how it slows down? Yeah, I don't like that. So I go linear. So watch this. I'll move all these to linear. And now you'll see the transitions are nice and smooth between them. Bam. Okay. There we go. And a lot of it is just finessing the speeds so the cameras don't feel too quick or too short. But that's really it. That's the magic. So to recap everything, get your reference photos, make a plan. So if you remember here, what we did, right? We made a plan about all the different assets, model things, then start taking it step by step. So we did the modeling, the texturing, then we did our terrain, our atmospherics, the context, and it wasn't that crazy. We were able to build this off of one image, right? So there's no excuse for you to be able to not do this for anything else. But that's really it. I hope you liked this video. Please like, and if you have any questions, drop a comment. And as always, please subscribe. It really helps the channel out. See you guys next time. Bye.